I'm standing in the conference room watching my career implode. Senior Vice President Marcus Wellington just called me completely incompetent in front of the biggest clients of the year, dismissing my critical system upgrade warnings as typical IT paranoia. The room falls silent as he suggests I stick to fixing printers. What Marcus doesn't know is that I hold master administrator access to every system he depends on. I'm about to teach him what real power looks like in the digital age. My name is Pauline, and 3 years ago I walked into Meridian Financial Solutions with nothing but a computer science degree and determination to prove myself in cybersecurity. The glass towers of downtown Chicago gleamed with promise that September morning, and I genuinely believed I'd found my professional home. Starting as a junior IT specialist, I threw myself into learning every system, every protocol, every vulnerability that could threaten our trading platforms. The work energized me. While other employees saw computers as tools, I saw them as ecosystems requiring constant protection and optimization. I spent nights studying emerging threats, weekends, implementing security patches and lunch breaks, designing more efficient network architectures. My supervisor, Tom, appreciated my dedication, noting in my first review that I possessed an intuitive understanding of system vulnerabilities that couldn't be taught. By my second year, I'd earned promotion to Senior Systems Administrator, a role that gave me comprehensive access to our entire digital infrastructure. I implemented cost-saving measures that reduced our IT expenses by 30%, while simultaneously strengthening our cybersecurity protocols. The trading floor respected my expertise, calling me whenever their systems hiccuped. I felt valued, competent, genuinely excited about building something meaningful. Then Marcus Wellington arrived. He transferred from our New York office with a reputation for aggressive management and impressive profit margins. During his first week, he scheduled individual meetings with department heads, positioning himself as someone who understood both technology and business strategy. When we met, he seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking detailed questions about our security measures and nodding thoughtfully at my explanations. Sarah from HR became my closest friend during this transition period. A warm woman with auburn hair and infectious laugh, she had worked at Meridian for 6 years and understood the company dynamics better than anyone. Over coffee, she mentioned Marcus's history with previous female employees, though she kept her comments vague. Something about high turnover in departments he managed talented women leaving unexpectedly. I didn't pay much attention initially. Corporate environments always generated gossip, and I preferred focusing on my technical responsibilities rather than office politics. However, over the following months, I began noticing patterns that made Sarah's warnings seem prophetic. Marcus started attending our technical meetings despite having no background in cybersecurity. He would interrupt my presentations to ask basic questions that revealed his ignorance, then follow up with suggestions that demonstrated he hadn't understood my answers. When I politely corrected his misunderstandings, he would smile tightly and suggest we discuss the technical details offline. The offline discussions never happened. Instead, Marcus began scheduling client presentations without including me, despite my role as the primary systems administrator. When I asked Tom about this exclusion, he looked uncomfortable and admitted that Marcus had suggested my technical explanations might confuse non-technical clients. Apparently, Marcus believed he could communicate our security measures more effectively to business stakeholders. This struck me as odd, considering Marcus frequently mispronounced basic cybersecurity terms and confused fundamental concepts like firewalls and encryption protocols. However, he possessed confidence that I lacked speaking with authority even when discussing topics he clearly didn't understand. My suspicions crystallized during a routine email maintenance task. While updating server permissions, I accidentally accessed a forwarded message thread that revealed something chilling. Marcus had been corresponding with his former supervisor in New York, discussing strategies for managing difficult female employees. The emails detailed his approach, publicly question their competence, exclude them from important meetings, then document their alleged performance issues to justify eventual termination. One email specifically mentioned Amanda, a brilliant systems analyst who had left our company suddenly 6 months before Marcus's arrival. According to the thread, Marcus had used identical tactics at his previous position, systematically undermining women until they resigned or could be terminated with cause. He described it as maintaining team efficiency by removing employees who challenged his authority. Reading those emails, I felt ice forming in my stomach. Marcus wasn't simply a demanding manager or someone struggling with technical concepts he didn't understand. He was deliberately and methodically destroying the careers of competent women who threatened his perceived authority. The pattern was sophisticated, designed to appear like normal performance management while systematically dismantling professional reputations. I printed copies of the emails and secured them in my personal files, though I wasn't sure what action to take. Confronting Marcus directly seemed futile, since he could easily claim the emails were taken out of context. Going to HR felt risky, since Sarah's warning suggested this behavior had occurred previously without meaningful consequences. Instead, I decided to document everything meticulously while continuing to perform my job at the highest level. If Marcus intended to challenge my competence, I would ensure my work spoke for itself. I had no idea that he was already planning something far more devastating than simple performance criticism. The realization that this wasn't random cruelty, but calculated career sabotage, hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't arrived at Meridian to improve our operations or contribute his expertise. He had come to establish dominance through systematic destruction of anyone who might challenge his authority, particularly women whose technical competence exceeded his own understanding. As I sat in my office that evening, staring at the printed emails, I understood that my dedication, expertise, and professional accomplishments meant nothing to Marcus. In his mind, I represented a threat that needed to be eliminated regardless of the damage to our department or the company's cybersecurity infrastructure. The battle lines were drawn, though only I knew the war had already begun. 6 months after discovering Marcus's pattern, I threw myself into developing what would become the most significant project of my career. Our trading systems faced increasingly sophisticated cyber threats, with financial firms losing millions to attacks that traditional security measures couldn't detect. I proposed creating an artificial intelligence system that would identify fraudulent transactions in real time, learning from attack patterns to prevent future breaches. The project demanded everything I had. I spent 12-hour days programming neural networks, analyzing transaction data, and testing algorithms against simulated attacks. Weekends disappeared as I refined the system's ability to distinguish between legitimate trading patterns and sophisticated fraud attempts. The work consumed my social life, my sleep schedule, my every waking thought, but the results justified the sacrifice. My fraud detection system could identify suspicious activities within milliseconds, preventing unauthorized transfers before they completed. During testing phases, it caught attempted breaches that our existing security measures had missed entirely. The system's machine learning capabilities meant it grew smarter with each attack attempt, building an ever-expanding database of threat signatures. Marcus initially dismissed the project as unnecessary complexity that would slow down legitimate transactions. During department meetings, he would interrupt my progress reports to suggest that traditional security measures were sufficient for our client base. He argued that implementing new systems created more vulnerabilities than they prevented, demonstrating his fundamental misunderstanding of cybersecurity principles. However, his attitude changed dramatically when my system prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. The attack came on a Tuesday morning in March. Hackers had infiltrated our network through a phishing email that bypassed our standard security protocols, gaining access to trading accounts containing over $30 million. Our traditional security measures detected nothing unusual as the attackers began transferring funds to offshore accounts using sophisticated techniques that mimicked legitimate trading patterns. My fraud detection system triggered every alarm I had programmed. Within 30 seconds of the first unauthorized transfer, it had blocked the hackers' access, reversed their transactions, and generated detailed logs of their attack methods. The entire breach was contained before a single dollar was stolen, and the system provided enough forensic evidence for law enforcement to trace the attack back to its source. The incident should have validated my expertise and demonstrated the value of innovative security measures. Instead, Marcus saw an opportunity that I never anticipated. 3 weeks later, Marcus scheduled a presentation for the board of directors to discuss our cybersecurity improvements. He sent me a brief email explaining that he would handle the technical presentation to avoid overwhelming board members with complex details. As the department head, he would take responsibility for communicating our security enhancements to senior leadership. I watched the presentation through a live video stream, expecting Marcus to at least acknowledge my role in developing the system. Instead, I witnessed something that shattered my faith in professional integrity. Marcus presented my fraud detection system as his own innovation. He described the conceptual framework using my exact words, explained the technical architecture with terminology he had learned from my reports, and claimed credit for the programming methodologies I had developed through months of intensive research. Board members nodded appreciatively as Marcus outlined his vision for the future of cybersecurity at Meridian Financial. When Board Chair David questioned him about specific technical details, Marcus responded with explanations I had given him during our department meetings. He even used the same analogies I had created to help him understand machine learning concepts. The presentation concluded with enthusiastic applause and congratulations for Marcus's innovative thinking and technical leadership. 2 days later, Marcus received a promotion to Senior Vice President and a $50,000 bonus for his outstanding contribution to company security. I sat in my office staring at the company-wide email announcing his advancement, feeling something die inside my chest. 6 months of my life, hundreds of hours of research and programming, a system that had saved the company $30 million, all credited to someone who couldn't distinguish between encryption and compression algorithms. The betrayal cut deeper than simple recognition theft. Marcus had stolen not just credit for my work, but my professional identity. In presenting my innovation as his achievement, he had transformed me from a technical expert into an invisible support staff member whose contributions didn't warrant acknowledgement. My suspicions about how he had acquired such detailed knowledge of my work were confirmed later that week when I discovered recording devices hidden in our conference rooms. During a routine maintenance check, I found tiny digital recorders attached beneath conference tables, where I had explained my project methodologies to Tom and other team members. Marcus had been secretly recording our technical discussions for months, collecting my ideas and explanations to use in his own presentations. The sophistication of his deception was staggering. He hadn't simply stolen credit for completed work. He had systematically harvested my intellectual contributions throughout the development process. Every breakthrough I had shared with colleagues, every innovative solution I had discussed in meetings, every technical insight I had offered during brainstorming sessions had been captured and cataloged for his future use. Confronting Tom about this theft felt pointless, since Marcus now outranked both of us in the corporate hierarchy. The company had explicitly rewarded his behavior with promotion and financial compensation. Challenging his version of events would require me to admit I had discovered the recording devices, potentially exposing myself to accusations of paranoia or insubordination. Instead, I began documenting everything with forensic precision. I maintained detailed logs of my work processes, saved every email exchange, and created backup copies of all project files. If Marcus intended to continue stealing my innovations, I would ensure that a comprehensive record existed to prove my actual contributions. What I didn't realize was that Marcus's theft of my fraud detection system was merely the opening move in a much larger strategy. He had demonstrated that he could claim credit for my work without consequences, establish himself as a technical visionary despite his ignorance, and advance his career by parasitically feeding off my expertise. Now he was ready to implement the second phase of his plan, my complete professional destruction. The recording devices weren't just tools for stealing my ideas. They were weapons he intended to use against me, and I had no idea that my own voice would soon become the instrument of my public humiliation. The meeting that would define my career began like any other Tuesday morning. Robert Chen from Blackstone Capital had scheduled a quarterly security review, bringing 2 partners to evaluate our cybersecurity infrastructure before renewing their $200 million investment portfolio. These reviews were routine technical presentations that I had conducted dozens of times with complete confidence. I had prepared meticulously, creating detailed charts that illustrated our security enhancements over the past year. My fraud detection system had prevented 17 attempted breaches since implementation, saving clients millions in potential losses. Our network response times had improved by 40% while simultaneously strengthening protective protocols. Every metric demonstrated that our cybersecurity program was operating at peak efficiency. However, during my preparation, I had discovered something that demanded immediate attention. A routine vulnerability scan had revealed a critical security gap in our primary trading platform. The issue was technical, but serious outdated encryption protocols that sophisticated attackers could potentially exploit to access client accounts. The vulnerability had existed for months, hidden beneath layers of newer security measures, but recent updates had exposed it to detection. Fixing the problem would require taking our trading systems offline for approximately 6 hours during the next maintenance window. The timing was inconvenient, since it would occur during peak trading hours for our West Coast clients, but the security risk was too significant to ignore. I had scheduled the maintenance for the following weekend and prepared to explain the necessity during our meeting with Blackstone Capital. I expected Marcus to support the security update despite the temporary inconvenience. After all, he had built his recent promotion on claiming credit for cybersecurity innovations. Surely he would understand that protecting client assets took priority over avoiding minor operational disruptions. The conference room was filled with tension when I arrived. Marcus sat at the head of the table wearing his most expensive suit and the confident expression he reserved for important client meetings. Robert and his partners had arranged their materials with the precision of auditors, preparing to examine every detail of our security infrastructure. I began my presentation with confidence outlining our security improvements and demonstrating the effectiveness of our protective measures. The Blackstone representatives nodded approvingly as I explained how our systems had evolved to address emerging threats. Everything proceeded normally until I reached the section about the encryption vulnerability. I explained the technical issue, clearly emphasizing that while the risk was low, the potential consequences were severe enough to require immediate attention. I outlined my maintenance plan, assuring the clients that the brief downtime would eliminate any possibility of exploitation while minimizing disruption to their trading activities. Marcus interrupted before I could finish. His voice carried a tone I had never heard before, cold and dismissive in a way that made the entire room uncomfortable. He suggested that I was being alarmist, creating problems where none existed, to justify my position within the company. According to Marcus, the vulnerability I had identified was theoretical at best, the kind of minor technical issue that inexperienced administrators often magnified into major concerns. I tried to explain the technical details more thoroughly, showing the vulnerability scan results and explaining how attackers could potentially exploit the security gap. Marcus cut me off again, this time with a condescending laugh that made my face burn with embarrassment. He turned to Robert and his partners, speaking as if I weren't present in the room. Marcus explained that I had a tendency toward what he called typical IT paranoia, always imagining worst-case scenarios that rarely materialized in practice. He suggested that my technical explanations confused the real issues, making simple maintenance tasks sound like emergency situations. The words hit me like physical blows. I watched the Blackstone representatives' expressions change from respectful attention to skeptical concern. Marcus was systematically destroying my credibility in real time, using his authority and confident delivery to make my expertise seem like incompetent fear-mongering. But he wasn't finished. Marcus suggested that I was creating security problems to justify my position within the department, implying that I routinely exaggerated minor issues to make my work seem more important than it actually was. He recommended that the clients ignore my alarmist tendencies and trust his business judgment over my technical assessments. The humiliation was complete and devastating. In less than 5 minutes, Marcus had transformed me from a respected cybersecurity expert into an incompetent employee whose opinions couldn't be trusted. The Blackstone representatives were no longer looking at me with professional respect, but with the uncomfortable pity reserved for someone who had just embarrassed themselves publicly. I sat in stunned silence as Marcus smoothly transitioned the conversation to other topics, effectively dismissing both me and my security concerns. The meeting concluded with handshakes and reassurances that Meridian Financial had everything under control. Robert thanked Marcus for his leadership and practical approach to cybersecurity management. As the clients left, Marcus offered me a patronizing smile and suggested that I focus on routine maintenance tasks rather than trying to impress clients with technical complexity they didn't need to understand. He recommended that I stick to fixing printers and leave strategic security decisions to people who understood business priorities. I returned to my office in a fog of humiliation and rage. My hands shook as I tried to process what had just occurred. 3 years of professional development, months of successful security implementations, a fraud detection system that had saved the company millions, all dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of an incompetent employee. The worst part was knowing that Marcus was completely wrong about the vulnerability. The encryption gap was real and dangerous, exactly the kind of security flaw that sophisticated attackers exploited to steal millions from financial firms. By dismissing my warnings, Marcus was exposing our clients to genuine risk while prioritizing his own appearance of confident leadership. As I sat staring at my computer screen trying to regain my composure, an unexpected system alert appeared that changed everything. A routine audit of administrative access logs had flagged unusual activity in our financial systems. Someone with high-level permissions had been accessing transaction records outside of normal business processes, creating subtle alterations that wouldn't be noticed during standard reviews. The modifications were sophisticated, designed to redirect small amounts from multiple accounts into hidden reserve funds. I ran deeper analysis protocols and discovered something that made my blood freeze. Marcus had been embezzling money from client accounts for over 2 years. The theft was brilliantly concealed using microtransactions that appeared to be routine administrative fees, a few dollars from thousands of accounts transferred to subsidiary accounts that he controlled, then moved to offshore holdings that existed outside our normal monitoring systems. The total amount exceeded $800,000, stolen gradually to avoid triggering automatic fraud detection protocols. My humiliation suddenly transformed into something much more dangerous. Marcus hadn't just destroyed my credibility to satisfy his ego or establish dominance. He had systematically undermined the cybersecurity expert who was most likely to discover his financial crimes. The public humiliation was calculated preparation for something much worse. As I delved deeper into the embezzlement evidence, I found draft emails and fabricated system logs that revealed the true scope of Marcus's plan. He wasn't just stealing money and covering his tracks, he was preparing to frame me for his crimes. The realization hit me like lightning. Marcus had spent months positioning me as an incompetent, paranoid employee whose technical assessments couldn't be trusted. Now he was building documentation that would make me appear responsible for the very crimes he had committed. My administrative access, my knowledge of financial systems, my recent professional frustrations would all serve as perfect evidence of my supposed guilt. The humiliation had been just the beginning. Marcus was planning to destroy my life completely while escaping with stolen money and a reputation as the manager who had caught a criminal employee. Sitting in my office that evening, surrounded by evidence of both his theft and his frame job, I understood that I wasn't just fighting for my professional reputation anymore. I was fighting for my freedom, my future, my very survival in a game where Marcus held every advantage except one. He had underestimated exactly how much power a cybersecurity expert wielded when pushed beyond all limits of endurance. The investigation consumed my existence for the next 3 weeks. Every spare moment was dedicated to meticulously documenting Marcus's embezzlement scheme while avoiding any action that might alert him to my discovery. I arrived at work early to analyze transaction logs before other employees arrived, stayed late to trace offshore transfers after the building emptied, and spent weekends mapping the sophisticated network of accounts he had created to hide his stolen funds. The scope of his theft was staggering. Marcus had developed a system that skimmed tiny amounts from thousands of client transactions, amounts so small that individual clients would never notice the discrepancies. However, when multiplied across our entire customer base over 2 years, those microtransactions had generated over $800,000 in stolen revenue. His method was brilliant in its simplicity. Marcus used his senior access privileges to create phantom administrative fees that appeared legitimate in routine audits. The stolen money was transferred to subsidiary accounts that existed within our system but operated outside normal monitoring protocols. From there, the funds moved through a series of shell companies before reaching offshore accounts in countries with strict banking privacy laws. What made the scheme particularly sophisticated was its integration with legitimate business processes. Marcus had timed his thefts to coincide with routine maintenance windows when transaction irregularities were less likely to trigger automated alerts. He had also programmed his transfers to mimic the patterns of genuine administrative fees, making them virtually invisible unless someone specifically searched for evidence of embezzlement. My neighbor Jake proved invaluable during this investigation. A former FBI forensic accountant who had retired to teach at a local community college, Jake understood financial crimes from both investigative and prosecutorial perspectives. Over coffee in my kitchen, I carefully explained the situation without revealing any confidential information, seeking advice on how to properly document evidence that could be used in legal proceedings. Jake emphasized the importance of maintaining an unbroken chain of evidence while avoiding any actions that could be construed as unauthorized system access. Since I was the senior systems administrator, my access to financial logs was completely legitimate, but I needed to document every search query and analysis procedure to prevent Marcus from claiming I had planted evidence or manipulated records. Following Jake's guidance, I created detailed timestamps for every piece of evidence I collected, saved multiple backup copies in secure locations, and maintained written logs of my investigation methodology. The documentation process was tedious, but I understood that any procedural errors could invalidate the evidence regardless of how damning it might be. As my investigation progressed, I discovered something that made my stomach drop with terror. Marcus wasn't just stealing money and covering his tracks. He was actively building a case to frame me for his crimes. Hidden in a secured folder that he thought I couldn't access, I found draft emails addressed to our company's legal department and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. The emails detailed his supposed discovery of embezzlement activities within our IT department, specifically pointing to my administrative access as the means by which the crimes had been committed. The fabricated evidence was sophisticated and convincing. Marcus had created false system logs that showed my user account accessing financial systems during off hours, manipulated transaction records to suggest I had implemented unauthorized transfer protocols, and even drafted performance reviews that painted me as a disgruntled employee with financial pressures that might motivate theft. One document particularly chilled me: a psychological profile that Marcus had apparently researched, describing how technical employees with my background often felt underappreciated and might resort to financial crimes to compensate for perceived professional injustices. He had even noted my recent humiliation during the client meeting as potential evidence of my emotional instability and criminal motivation. Reading these documents, I realized that the public humiliation had been carefully planned preparation for this frame job. Marcus had systematically destroyed my credibility so that when he presented evidence of embezzlement, nobody would question whether I was capable of such crimes. My reputation as a paranoid, incompetent employee would make me the perfect scapegoat. The timeline for his plan was becoming clear. Marcus intended to let me continue working for several more weeks, allowing time for his fabricated evidence to appear authentic. Then he would schedule a meeting with senior management and law enforcement, presenting himself as the vigilant supervisor who had discovered a criminal employee. By the time investigators examined the evidence, Marcus would have already transferred the remaining stolen funds beyond recovery while positioning himself as the hero who had saved the company from further losses. I would face criminal charges, professional destruction, and likely imprisonment while he escaped with almost $1 million and enhanced reputation as an effective manager. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the financial crimes. Marcus had spent months studying my personality, my professional relationships, my technical capabilities to design a frame job specifically tailored to my circumstances. He understood that my dedication to cybersecurity made me the perfect target, since my legitimate access to financial systems would provide the apparent means for embezzlement. However, as I analyzed his scheme more thoroughly, I began to notice subtle flaws that revealed his lack of technical sophistication. Marcus's fabricated logs contained timestamps that didn't align with actual system operations, transfer protocols that couldn't function as he had described them, and user activity patterns that violated basic cybersecurity principles I would never ignore. His knowledge of financial systems was sufficient to steal money, but inadequate to create convincing evidence that I had committed his crimes. More importantly, Marcus had underestimated my forensic capabilities. Every action he had taken within our systems had left digital traces that I could follow. His embezzlement scheme, his fabricated evidence, his research into framing techniques all existed within computer networks that I understood far better than he did. While Marcus saw computers as tools for theft and deception, I saw them as comprehensive record-keeping systems that documented every action with unforgiving precision. As I compiled my evidence against him, I realized that I possessed something Marcus couldn't fabricate or steal the technical expertise to prove his guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. But I also realized that time was running out faster than I had anticipated. Through careful monitoring of his email activity, I discovered that Marcus had scheduled a meeting with our quarterly audit team for the following week. The external auditors would be examining our financial systems as part of their routine compliance review, providing the perfect opportunity for Marcus to direct their attention toward the evidence he had planted against me. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, investigators would likely be arresting me for crimes I hadn't committed while Marcus prepared to disappear with his stolen fortune. I had 6 days to turn the tables, completely using my technical skills to transform his own trap into the mechanism of his destruction. The battle for my freedom was about to begin, and this time I held the only weapons that mattered: truth evidence and the power to control every system Marcus depended on for his scheme's success. Marcus had taught me something important during his months of psychological warfare. Sometimes the most devastating response to betrayal wasn't confrontation or revenge, but simply allowing someone to destroy themselves with their own weapons while the whole world watched. Time became my enemy as I developed a comprehensive strategy to expose Marcus's crimes during the upcoming audit. With only 6 days before his planned frame job, every decision required perfect execution while maintaining the appearance of normal daily operations. I couldn't afford any actions that might alert Marcus to my knowledge of his scheme, yet I needed to prepare irrefutable evidence that would convince external auditors of his guilt. My plan required turning Marcus's own presentation into the trap that would destroy him. Sarah from HR became my crucial ally during this preparation phase, though I couldn't reveal the full scope of Marcus's crimes without compromising the investigation. Instead, I carefully explained that I had discovered financial irregularities that needed to be addressed during the upcoming audit. Sarah's 6 years at Meridian had taught her to recognize the signs of corporate malfeasance, and she immediately understood the implications. Through Sarah, I learned that Marcus had already scheduled private meetings with both the audit team leader and our company's legal counsel for Thursday afternoon, immediately following the main presentation. According to his calendar, these meetings were labeled as discussions about employee performance issues that required confidential handling. The timing was perfect for his frame job. Marcus would present his fabricated evidence to the auditors during the main session, then use the private meetings to provide additional details about my supposed crimes. By Friday morning, law enforcement would likely be executing search warrants while Marcus expressed shock and disappointment at my betrayal. However, his meticulous planning contained one fatal flaw that I was uniquely positioned to exploit. Marcus's entire scheme depended on computer systems that I controlled completely. As the senior systems administrator, I possessed master access to every network Marcus needed for his presentation. The financial records he intended to display, the fabricated logs he had created to frame me the offshore account information he thought was hidden beyond discovery, all existed within systems where I held ultimate authority. My strategy was elegantly simple. I would use Marcus's own presentation to expose his crimes in real time. During the 3 days leading up to the audit, I worked with surgical precision to prepare my counterstrike. Using my legitimate administrative access, I created hidden monitoring programs that would track every action Marcus took during his presentation. More importantly, I programmed remote access tools that would allow me to control the presentation displays from my office. The technical challenges were substantial but manageable for someone with my expertise. I needed to intercept Marcus's display signals without detection, substitute my evidence for his fabricated materials, and ensure that every action was recorded for later legal proceedings. The programs I developed were invisible to standard detection methods, operating within normal system processes that Marcus wouldn't think to examine. Jake's advice proved invaluable during this preparation phase. He emphasized that my evidence needed to be presented in a way that made Marcus's guilt undeniable, while preventing him from claiming the materials had been manipulated. The solution was to use Marcus's own computer and accounts to display the evidence, making it impossible for him to argue that I had planted anything. I spent Tuesday evening programming what I called presentation interception protocols. These tools would remain dormant until activated remotely, then seamlessly take control of display systems to show the real financial records instead of Marcus's fabricated versions. The auditors would witness Marcus's embezzlement evidence appearing on his own screen, using his own access credentials, while his attempts to regain control would only make him appear more guilty. The psychological warfare aspect was equally important. Marcus had spent months undermining my credibility, positioning me as an incompetent, paranoid employee whose technical assessments couldn't be trusted. I intended to use his own confidence against him, allowing him to begin his presentation normally before systematically destroying his credibility in front of the people whose opinions mattered most. Wednesday brought an unexpected complication when I discovered that Marcus had scheduled additional private meetings for Friday morning with FBI financial crimes investigators. Through careful examination of his email traffic, I learned that he had already contacted federal authorities about suspected embezzlement within our IT department. Agents were planning to arrive Friday morning to discuss the evidence he intended to present during Thursday's audit. The timeline was even tighter than I had realized. Marcus wasn't just planning to frame me during the audit, he was planning to have me arrested less than 24 hours later. However, this acceleration of his timeline also provided an opportunity. If I could expose his crimes convincingly during Thursday's audit, the FBI agents would arrive Friday morning to arrest the real criminal rather than his intended scapegoat. My final preparations on Wednesday evening were meticulous and methodical. I tested every remote access protocol multiple times, verified that all evidence files were properly formatted for presentation, and created backup systems in case Marcus attempted to shut down the primary displays. I also programmed automatic recording systems that would capture everything that happened during the audit, creating a permanent record of his exposure. The evidence I had compiled was comprehensive and damning. Financial records showing 2 years of systematic embezzlement offshore account information, revealing where the stolen money was hidden, email communications detailing his plan to frame me, and fabricated logs that proved his attempt to plant evidence. The documentation was so thorough that no reasonable person could question Marcus's guilt. More importantly, I had discovered the specific method Marcus planned to use for presenting his fabricated evidence. Through monitoring his computer activity, I learned that he had created a special presentation folder containing all the false logs and manipulated records he intended to show the auditors. He had even rehearsed his explanation of how I had supposedly committed the crimes, practicing the technical terminology to sound convincing during his presentation. This folder would become the key to his destruction. My plan was to wait until Marcus began showing his fabricated evidence, then remotely replace the contents of his presentation folder with the real financial records proving his guilt. The auditors would watch as Marcus's own computer displayed evidence of his embezzlement using his own access credentials, while he frantically tried to explain why his presentation wasn't showing what he expected. The beauty of this approach was that Marcus's technical ignorance would work against him. He wouldn't understand what was happening quickly enough to regain control, and his desperate attempts to shut down the presentation would only make him appear more guilty to the observing auditors. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. As I prepared for what would either be my vindication or my complete destruction, I realized that Marcus had taught me something valuable about the nature of power in corporate environments. He had assumed that authority and confidence could overcome technical expertise, that political maneuvering was more powerful than factual evidence. Marcus believed that his position as senior vice president made him untouchable, regardless of the crimes he had committed or the lives he had destroyed. Today he would learn that in the digital age, true power belonged to those who understood the systems that controlled everything else. The audit was scheduled to begin at 10 in the morning. By noon, either Marcus would succeed in framing me for his crimes, or he would face the consequences of underestimating exactly how much damage a cybersecurity expert could inflict when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. I was about to find out which outcome awaited us both. The audit conference room filled with tension as the morning session began. External auditor Jennifer Walsh had arrived with 2 associates prepared to conduct their quarterly review of our financial systems and cybersecurity protocols. Marcus sat at the head of the table, wearing his most confident expression, having positioned himself as the presenter who would guide the auditors through their evaluation of our IT department's performance. I occupied a seat near the back of the room, maintaining the appearance of a routine participant, while my laptop remained connected to the building's wireless network. Hidden beneath normal system monitoring applications, my remote access tools waited for activation. Marcus had no idea that every system he planned to use was under my complete control. The presentation began normally with Marcus providing an overview of our cybersecurity improvements over the past quarter. He spoke confidently about enhanced protective measures and improved response protocols, taking credit for innovations that I had actually developed. The auditors nodded approvingly as Marcus positioned himself as a technical leader who understood both security needs and business priorities. Jennifer asked specific questions about our fraud detection systems, and Marcus responded with explanations that I recognized as verbatim quotes from my own reports. He had memorized enough technical terminology to sound knowledgeable, though his fundamental ignorance became apparent whenever the auditors asked follow-up questions that required deeper understanding. For 40 minutes, Marcus's presentation proceeded exactly as he had planned. He covered our security protocols, discussed recent improvements, and gradually built toward the section where he would present evidence of embezzlement within our IT department. I watched him glance at me several times, probably enjoying the anticipation of my impending destruction. Then Marcus reached the portion of his presentation that would change both our lives forever. He opened the folder containing what he believed were fabricated logs and manipulated financial records that would frame me for his crimes. Marcus began explaining to the auditors that recent security audits had revealed irregularities in our financial systems, suggesting that someone with administrative access had been conducting unauthorized transactions. As he clicked to display the first piece of evidence, I activated my remote access protocols. The presentation screen flickered momentarily, then displayed something Marcus had never seen before, a comprehensive analysis of his own embezzlement activities generated by our system's fraud detection algorithms. The display showed 2 years of systematic theft, with detailed breakdowns of the microtransactions he had used to steal over $800,000 from client accounts. Marcus stared at the screen in confusion, clearly not understanding why his presentation was showing different information than he expected. He clicked frantically through his folder, trying to access the fabricated evidence he had prepared, but every file had been replaced with documentation of his actual crimes. Jennifer leaned forward in her chair, studying the financial data with professional interest. The evidence was clear and comprehensive. Offshore transfers, hidden accounts, manipulation of administrative fees, and sophisticated money laundering techniques that violated numerous federal banking regulations. Marcus attempted to regain control by closing the presentation software, but my remote access tools immediately reopened the displays with even more damaging evidence. Transaction logs showed his user account accessing financial systems during off hours, transferring funds to accounts that existed outside normal oversight. Email records revealed his research into money laundering techniques and offshore banking regulations. The room fell silent as the auditors absorbed the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Marcus's own computer was displaying irrefutable evidence of systematic embezzlement using his own access credentials, while timestamps and system logs proved that he had been the only person with the authority to conduct these transactions. Jennifer asked Marcus to explain the financial irregularities shown in the presentation, but he could only stammer incomprehensible responses about technical problems and system malfunctions. His confident demeanor had completely evaporated, replaced by panic and desperation, as he realized that his own presentation was destroying him. When Marcus attempted to shut down his computer entirely, my remote access tools triggered automatic backup displays throughout the conference room. Every screen in the building began showing evidence of his crimes, broadcasting his embezzlement activities to anyone with access to our network systems. The psychological impact was devastating. Marcus found himself trapped in a room where every display showed evidence of his guilt, while auditors documented his panicked responses for their official report. His attempts to explain the situation only made him appear more guilty, since he clearly didn't understand the technical details of how the evidence was being presented. Jennifer requested access to Marcus's computer to conduct independent verification of the financial data. When she examined his files directly, she discovered the original fabricated logs he had created to frame me, along with draft emails detailing his plan to blame the embezzlement on a disgruntled IT employee. The discovery of planted evidence sealed Marcus's fate completely. The auditors found detailed documentation of his scheme to frame me, including psychological profiles he had researched and performance reviews he had fabricated to make me appear unstable and financially motivated. Jennifer immediately understood that they were witnessing not just embezzlement, but an elaborate conspiracy to destroy an innocent employee's career and freedom. Marcus's final desperate attempt to salvage the situation was to claim that I had somehow hacked his computer and planted evidence to frame him for crimes I had committed. However, this explanation collapsed when Jennifer examined the technical details of how the evidence was stored and accessed. Every piece of documentation existed within Marcus's own user account, protected by passwords that only he knew, accessed through his personal credentials, during times when I could prove I had been elsewhere. The fabricated logs he had created to frame me contained technical errors that demonstrated his ignorance of the systems he was trying to manipulate. More damaging was the discovery that Marcus had been researching embezzlement techniques and money laundering strategies for months using his company computer to access websites that explained financial crimes. His browser history revealed extensive study of offshore banking regulations and methods for concealing stolen funds. As the morning session concluded, Marcus sat in stunned silence while the auditors compiled their preliminary findings. Jennifer informed him that they would be suspending the routine audit to focus on the financial crimes they had discovered, and that law enforcement would need to be contacted immediately. The irony was perfect and devastating. Marcus had scheduled this audit as the vehicle for framing me for his crimes, but instead had provided the perfect forum for exposing his own guilt to independent investigators whose testimony would be unimpeachable in court. His scheme had been brilliant in concept, but fatally flawed in execution. Marcus understood human psychology and corporate politics well enough to manipulate people and situations, but he had never understood that computer systems maintained perfect records of every action taken within them. By attempting to use technology, he didn't comprehend to commit crimes against someone who understood those systems completely. Marcus had created the instruments of his own destruction. As the auditors prepared to contact federal investigators, I realized that my months of careful documentation and strategic planning had achieved something beyond mere vindication. Marcus's public destruction in front of independent auditors meant that no one could question the legitimacy of the evidence or claim that I had manipulated anything for personal revenge. The man who had humiliated me, stolen my innovations, and planned to destroy my life was about to face the full consequences of underestimating exactly how much power a cybersecurity expert wielded when fighting for survival. Justice was about to be served with digital precision. 6 months have passed since that morning when Marcus's world collapsed in real time. As I reflect on everything that happened, I'm amazed by how completely the situation transformed both our lives, though in very different directions. Marcus was arrested by FBI agents the following Friday morning, exactly as he had planned, except they came for him instead of me. The evidence was overwhelming: $873,000 in stolen funds, sophisticated money laundering operations spanning 2 years, and detailed documentation of his plan to frame an innocent employee for his crimes. Federal prosecutors called it one of the most elaborate embezzlement schemes they had encountered in the financial sector. The trial lasted 3 weeks, during which I testified about the technical aspects of his theft and the cybersecurity measures that ultimately exposed him. Marcus's defense attorneys attempted to argue that he had been entrapped or that I had somehow manipulated the evidence, but the forensic analysis was irrefutable. Every action he had taken existed within computer systems that maintained perfect records, and his own emails and research history proved his criminal intent beyond any reasonable doubt. Marcus received a 7-year federal sentence for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy charges. He was also ordered to pay full restitution to the affected clients, though most of the stolen money had been recovered from his offshore accounts during the investigation. The judge specifically noted the sophisticated nature of his crimes and his attempt to destroy an innocent person's career as factors that justified the maximum penalty. My own life changed dramatically in ways I never expected. 2 weeks after Marcus's arrest, CEO David called me into his office to discuss the situation. I expected to receive some form of commendation for exposing the embezzlement, but David offered something far more significant: a promotion to Chief Information Security Officer with a substantial salary increase and complete authority over our cybersecurity infrastructure. The board of directors had realized that my technical expertise had saved the company not just from ongoing theft, but from the catastrophic liability that would have resulted from Marcus's continued crimes. They also understood that losing an employee of my capabilities would be devastating to their cybersecurity operations, especially after witnessing what I could accomplish when properly motivated. My new role allowed me to implement comprehensive reforms that addressed both technical vulnerabilities and the corporate culture problems that had enabled Marcus's behavior. I established new protocols for monitoring administrative access, created independent oversight systems for financial transactions, and developed training programs that taught employees to recognize and report suspicious activities. More importantly, I was able to address the systematic harassment of women that Marcus had practiced throughout his career. Working with Sarah, who received a promotion to Director of Human Resources, we implemented policies that protected employees from retaliation when reporting harassment or discrimination. We also established mentorship programs that supported women in technical roles, ensuring that no one would face the isolation I had experienced. Amanda, the systems analyst who had left the company before Marcus's arrival, returned as my deputy after learning about his exposure and prosecution. She brought valuable insights about his previous victims and helped me understand the long-term psychological damage caused by his systematic harassment campaigns. Together, we created support systems for other women who had been targeted by similar behavior. The other women Marcus had victimized at previous companies also found resolution. The FBI investigation had revealed his pattern of harassment and discrimination, spanning multiple employers, leading to civil lawsuits that resulted in substantial settlements. Several companies were forced to review their own management practices and implement stronger protections for employees. Tom, my former mentor, became one of my strongest supporters in the new role. He admitted that he had suspected something was wrong with Marcus's behavior, but hadn't understood the extent of the problem. Tom helped me navigate the corporate politics necessary to implement lasting changes while maintaining focus on technical excellence. The fraud detection system that Marcus had stolen credit for became the foundation for industry-wide improvements in financial cybersecurity. I was invited to present at conferences across the country, sharing the technical innovations that had prevented not just Marcus's theft, but dozens of similar attacks against other financial firms. The recognition felt validating after years of having my expertise dismissed or stolen. However, the most meaningful change was personal rather than professional. The experience taught me that technical expertise alone wasn't enough to navigate complex human dynamics. I had spent years focusing solely on systems and protocols while ignoring the political and psychological aspects of corporate environments. Marcus's systematic harassment had succeeded initially because I hadn't understood that my technical competence made me a target rather than providing protection. Fighting back required me to combine my cybersecurity skills with strategic thinking about human behavior and organizational dynamics. I learned to document everything, meticulously build alliances with trustworthy colleagues, and recognize warning signs of manipulative behavior before it could escalate into destructive patterns. Most importantly, I discovered that my abilities carried responsibilities beyond protecting computer systems. Technology expertise provided power that could be used to protect vulnerable people and expose dangerous behavior, but only if I was willing to take risks and accept the personal costs of confronting corruption. The mentorship program I established for young women in technology focuses on these lessons. I teach them not just technical skills, but how to recognize workplace harassment, document evidence properly, and build support networks that can provide protection when facing systematic discrimination. I want to ensure that no one else experiences the isolation and vulnerability that nearly destroyed my career. Jake, my neighbor who provided crucial advice during the investigation, became a close friend who helped me process the emotional trauma of Marcus's psychological warfare. He reminded me that surviving systematic harassment required not just technical skills, but emotional resilience and the ability to maintain perspective during extended periods of stress and uncertainty. Sarah and I developed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to improving corporate culture. She helped me understand the importance of building bridges between technical and administrative departments, ensuring that harassment patterns could be identified and addressed before they destroyed careers or lives. Looking back, I realized that Marcus inadvertently taught me valuable lessons about the nature of power and corruption in modern organizations. His systematic harassment revealed how intelligent, manipulative people could exploit structural weaknesses to advance their careers while destroying others. However, his ultimate failure demonstrated that technical expertise properly applied with strategic thinking could expose and defeat even sophisticated schemes. The experience fundamentally changed my understanding of what it means to be a cybersecurity expert. Protecting systems isn't just about preventing external attacks or technical failures. It's about recognizing that the greatest threats often come from within organizations, perpetrated by people who abuse their authority to exploit others. Today, I wake up every morning knowing that my work protects not just financial data and computer networks, but the careers and lives of people who depend on fair, honest leadership. The technical skills I developed over years of study and practice have become tools for justice rather than just problem solving. I learned that standing up for yourself reveals not just your own strength, but exposes the fundamental weakness of those who prey on others. Marcus appeared powerful because he exploited people who couldn't or wouldn't fight back, but when confronted with someone who possessed both the skills and determination to resist, his entire facade collapsed. The most satisfying aspect of the resolution isn't Marcus's punishment or my professional advancement, but the knowledge that I prevented him from destroying other lives. The investigation revealed that he had planned to expand his harassment campaigns to additional female employees while continuing his embezzlement activities. By exposing him when I did, I protected people who never knew they were in danger. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had simply quit the company after the humiliation, as Marcus clearly expected. He would have continued stealing money and destroying careers, eventually moving to another organization to repeat the pattern. The temporary satisfaction of avoiding confrontation would have enabled ongoing harm to countless other people. Fighting back required me to risk everything I had built professionally, but the alternative was allowing corruption to triumph while innocent people suffered. The lesson I carry forward is that technical expertise creates moral obligations as well as career opportunities. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced systematic harassment or discrimination in your workplace? How did you find the courage to fight back, or what prevented you from speaking up? Your experiences could help others who are facing similar challenges, so please share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it when they need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to let corruption and harassment destroy their lives. And share this with someone who needs to know that technical skills can be powerful tools for justice when combined with determination and strategic thinking. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how powerless you might feel when facing systematic harassment, you possess more strength and options than you realize. Sometimes the most important battle is the one you fight not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone convince you that expertise and integrity are weaknesses rather than sources of real power.